Welcome to another episode of Seeing Them Live, a podcast featuring memorable concert stories from live music fans. Everyone has a concert story, and hopefully, one day, we'll hear yours.
Deborah Winger came to see us one time. We had Oscar-winning actors and film producers, and there was one night that I looked out in the audience, and it was a Friday night at Largo on Fairfax, and David Bowie was sitting in a booth halfway back the back of the room.
Today's guests are Ben Daughtry and Jonathan Palmer from the band Love Jones. After more than 3 decades of blending lounge, soul, pop, and sharp-witted storytelling into a sound all their own, the band is back with a brand new album, The Greatest Show on Earth. The record captures everything longtime fans love about Love Jones: big personality, rich musicianship, and humor, while still delivering genuinely great songs. Ben and Jonathan, welcome to Seeing Them Live.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Yeah, and I also like to thank Mike at Earshot Media for setting up this interview. Yeah, I thought we could just kind of do a back and forth, guys. You know, we'll talk about your concerts first, and then I'd like to do a history of the band, some of your recordings, and of course the new album. We'll talk about that as well. So yeah, it was kind of funny. Ben and Jonathan, your first concerts are both Van Halen. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So Ben, you saw them earlier on as an opening act.
Yeah. And I was surprised, too, that that was Jonathan's choice. I didn't know. When I saw that, I thought that was great. I did see them as an opening act. It was, in fact, not the first concert I'd been to, but one of the very, very earliest. I was way too young to be there. It wasn't that far from my house. I think I'm trying to remember how we got there. We might have taken the public transportation. Like, I didn't even remember the venue. I was 14 years old. But I knew that I had heard Van Halen on the radio. And my friends and I were like, what in the hell is that? That's the greatest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Like, it just blew everybody's mind. I can see these guys. And so we went down there, and we were way too young to be in there. You know, it's the 70s. Everybody smoked pot and drinking, and their, denim bell-bottom trousers and vests and everything. I had, like, kind of working on shoulder length hair. I wanted to have it, but it hadn't grown out yet. So we were trying to be cool, and we weren't. And the thing that I remember most about it was that Black Sabbath was absolutely horrible, that we left before they even finished. Van Halen they were probably 20 and 21 years old at the time, and they sounded like a bomb going on. Like, it still resonates in my ears. I can hear it like it was yesterday. They hit the stage, and it was like a machine. It was completely floored in every aspect, by their showmanship, by their musical virtuosity, by David Lee Roth's bon vivant personality on stage. I just couldn't believe a guy would get out there and tear it up like that in this sort of vaudeville, razzle-dazzle kind of way. So great. And then Black Sabbath came on. Ozzy could barely make it through a song. They seemed old. They seemed terrible. And we probably watched like 3 or 4 songs and left. One of my early beer drinking experiences, and was probably on my way to throw up on the side of the building.
Yeah, that was like his last show with the band, and then they, I guess, fired him for his drug and alcohol issues.
Not surprised. Yeah, terrible.
So yeah, that sounds like maybe they weren't at the top of their game at all at that point.
No, any way, shape, or form.
But yeah, then Jonathan, you saw them, 1980? I'd written down like this Invasion tour at Freedom Hall.
They called it The Invasion, the tour, and it was for Women and Children First, which remains my favorite Van Halen album. I feel like it is the most reckless and wild-sounding collection of songs they did, and the tour was similarly chaotic and super powerful live show. I was 14 years old. I had not been to any shows. I grew up, listening to a lot of Motown and Philly soul, and there were a lot of, show tunes in the household growing up, and a lot of folk music and 60s music and singer-songwriter stuff. And when I started hearing heavy music, I immediately gravitated towards it, both on the more commercial, British metal side with Zeppelin and Sabbath and everything that came after leading up to Van Halen, as well as on the punk and hardcore side with the British punk stuff that then started to influence American punk in the late 70s. And So when Van Halen came in Louisville, we didn't get a lot of cool music coming through town. We got kind of what was spoon fed to us by the corporate, record industry machine. And what that was typically tended to be that very right down Main Street kind of hard rock. And Van Halen was like all the stuff that came through town. That was probably the one band that came on a recurring basis that was unique and cool. And they kind of scratched both itches, like they were commercially viable, but also kind of had an edge to them and a danger. And it really just blew my mind to be in this big room at Freedom Hall, which is still there, but that was like the big concert arena venue of our youth in Louisville, Kentucky. And seeing the musicianship of the guys and of Dave's just insane charisma. I just remember and I wasn't, I didn't drink when I was young, but seeing him like swig from a whiskey bottle repeatedly through the show was like, oh, that guy's he can really put it away. And of course, years later, I find out that was a giant jug of iced tea.
I was there. I was at that. I saw Van Halen every time they came to Louisville. And the thing I remember about that show, wasn't that the one where Michael Anthony, like there was a big bomb or something that came out, and when they played In the Cradle of Rock, his keyboard was inside of this like bomb casing or something?
I think that might have been the next tour on the Fair Warning. I think that might have been the Fair Warning tour.
I had them all confabulated in my brain.
At any rate, it was a good kickoff. And, I bought tickets when they went on sale. I think I have the stub. I think it's $7.50 was the ticket price. It was a festival seating. So this was before the Who's fateful night in Cincinnati that led to essentially the end of festival seating for, years and years. So we got a nice seat, like midway up in the stands. And my friend and I, who were accompanied by my mom, who decided she wanted to go also. And she bought her own ticket, unbeknownst to me, kind of, when we were pulling up, as opposed to getting dropped off. She's like, I'm coming in, you guys. And I remember her like taking notes during the show. Like she was just thought some of Dave's remarks were particularly funny. And she became a Van Halen fan after that, which is pretty hilarious.
Wow. Yeah, I actually, a long time ago, I interviewed my mom, and it's called the Concert Mom. And yeah, moms are always a big part of taking their kids to concerts, it seems. And she took me and my friends to my first concerts and all these kids. And like, it is kind of crazy because like you talk about this Freedom Hall place. I mean, that's nearly, I looked at capacity, it was like 17,000 people. And we went to some big shows like at Soldier Field and Comiskey, the old Comiskey Park, White Sox Park. Yeah, the moms out there, we owe a huge debt to them for live music because they're usually the ones taking their kids to shows. Every once in a while you get a dad in there, but it's usually the mom, it seems. So
yeah, moms are cooler. My mom just passed away a couple of months ago, and we had a memorial for her recently. And she was just such a music fan, and she put that love of music into my life really early on. So it wasn't like, I wasn't like, oh, my mom's coming. I was like, yeah, my mom's coming. She loves music. It's going to be cool. The next show we went to, though, I was like, Mom, you're dropping me off for this one. And that was 4 months after that. I went to see the Cars at the same venue, I think with the same friend on the Panorama tour, which was also just amazing. Yeah, that was when I went to like, I made a point of like, I'm going down on the floor because it was open floor down on the floor of Freedom Hall. And I think I got like 10 feet from the stage and I was like, man, Elliot Easton is like playing all these solos right to me. So that kind of was like probably more impactful than the Van Halen show in a lot of ways because I got really close. And that felt like, oh, I can really connect with music and performers.
At his mother's memorial, his brother told the story, which I don't remember, that when the Beastie Boys did their first big tour, everybody was reporting that there was going to be crime and teenage drinking and all this stuff. So his brother's like, I have to be there. We all were there. We all loved it. And he said that after the show, and I don't remember this, I was back at the soundboard with his mom and Angelo from Fishbone, who had opened the show, having a conversation. But I don't remember a moment of that.
Wow. Sorry to hear about your mom. She sounds like a really cool person. And yeah, you owe a lot to her, I guess.
Marianne Palmer, one of the greats. Thanks, Charles.
Well, I thought we could move into these categories and we call it your best concerts. But I think, Ben, maybe you coined the term most important concert. And I was thinking maybe we should change the category because best is always tough. But under bests or most important, maybe you guys listed a few. And I thought we could just go back and forth real quick. Ben, you were almost crushed at a Ted Nugent concert, apparently.
Same place, Freedom Hall.
Okay.
Probably 16 years old. I really wanted to get to the front. I wanted to see the Nuge in all of his glory. This was before he went all red state. You know, we all love Cat Scratch Fever. Everybody says in Louisville, you want to be in Louisville where the world ends because everything hits here 10 years late. And Nugent in the late 70s, early 80s was big amongst me and my friends and the sort of Hesher group. And I just remember going there, same thing, tickets $8. Of course, I'm going to go see Ted Nugent. And we're like, let's get up as close as we can, just like Jonathan was saying. I want to be inches from the Motor City Madman. He comes on, and the entire crowd surges forward. We all go down like a human wave, rushed. I thought it was hilarious. I actually thought it was really fun, but a lot of people were really scared. And Ted had to actually get on the mic and go, come on, man. Everybody be cool, back up, you know? And we did. And everybody still was just incredibly crushed after that. But it was one of my first experiences. And also being crushed up against other young women of that age was totally unpleasant.
Yeah, I would listen to his Double Live Gonzo album a million times. I think I've listened to that album way back when it came out. Yeah, I was a big Ted Nugent fan as well, but never did see him. Jonathan, you have this Metallica show on their doing the Black Album tour, also at Freedom Hall, 1992, I guess it was, March 19th, I have, as one of your most or best, most important concerts.
Yeah, I mean, also that was a special night. I was there with my brother. I went with my brother to quite a few shows, but that one, I think it was on or around his birthday. And I think I invited him kind of last minute, or I got the tickets very last minute. I had interviewed for a newspaper article in the Courier Journal, Louisville's newspaper. I used to write for them about music. I was a journalism major at Syracuse, and I wrote, and I still write, in addition to my work in the band and as a music executive over the years. But it was an exciting moment because I think the record had gone like top 5 on the charts like that week. It was shortly after the album came out, and they were sort of having this ascendant moment of becoming this big commercial proposition. Pretty sure it's like a diamond status album. I think it sold over 10 million.
Yeah.
You know, that was probably the biggest selling metal album of all time, I'm going to say.
Might be.
Yeah, it's up there.
I think it is. It's either that or Back in Black, I think. But it felt like a shift, and the crowd was there for it. And they showed this really fun, like, you know, sort of tour video before the show that kind of put their personalities out there in a big way. And it was really, really exciting. It was a fun night. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. And despite we're Biggie because of, I have no idea at this point in terms of like my tastes and proclivities, but I think that they've influenced me as a performer and a songwriter in some strange ways. And just the way they keep at it is super inspiring to me. And I went to see them a couple of years ago up in Seattle on the 72 Seasons tour that they're doing. That's this endless tour they're on right now. And it just felt like they bring their show into town and do these like art installations and charitable initiatives with their charity foundation. And they really kind of activate communities, and the joy and love that they bring to live performance has always been like super inspiring to me, which is, it kind of belies the sort of menace and heaviness and, you know, dark undertones of their music. And I've always liked that sort of duality of the happy, sad, the, you know, melancholy underlying the joy. And that's the range of human experience. And that was encapsulated in that show. And God bless Metallica.
Yeah, they never, from what I understand, never phone it in. Like when they came to Chicago, they played 2 different sets each night they were here. And then they always play a song that's specific to the city that they're in. And that's incredible. to have that kind of variation. And I mean, the fans obviously love that, especially like a diehard fan. You'd go to both shows, right? Because you'd see different songs performed. And I read this cool book by this author, Ben Apatow, who's been on the podcast. It's Metallica, the 2495 book. And it's a very thorough book. And he goes into like all that kind of stuff. And I learned a ton about Metallica, even though I've never seen them live. So they sound awesome live.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe a couple more guys. Ben, back to you. You jumping on stage with GWAR, the band GWAR, and getting, I don't know, did you get arrested as a result of jumping on stage, or did that happen afterwards?
Almost got arrested. I ran. We were in New Orleans for Mardi Gras, just down there partying our balls off. Ridiculous. GWAR happened to be in town on acid. I'm like, let's go see him. This tiny little venue, summer, sweltering hot. And I'm like, I want to get up there. I want to be part of the show. And my friends were like, no, that's not a good idea. And I'm like, well, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to do it anyway. And I jumped up there and they pushed me off, and then they kicked me out of the club, and then I ran back in, did it again. And then, the doorman's like, we're calling the fucking cops. You better get out of here. And I had done that before. Actually, it's funny, in Louisville, Molly Hatchet, I was in high school, and they had these WLRS 102 was the local station, the Walrus. And they had $1.02 concerts. And I really wasn't into Molly Hatchet, but I was like, for $1.02, I'm going. And I did the same thing, took a bunch of benzos, I think, I stole out of my best friend's mom's medicine cabinet, drank with them, somehow ended up on stage with Molly Hatchet, same thing, escorted out of the building. But I think that is just like, there's a side of me that like kind of wants to be up there. People.
Well, you figured it out. You figured it out how to do it the right way.
Right. Now I could do it on shows. I don't need to sneak on other people's.
I mean, I might like to kick you out sometimes when we're on stage together, but, I hold back. Couldn't do it without you.
Well, and you guys would have maybe a little bit of sympathy if somebody from the crowd jumps up on the stage, and you'd understand,
If our show doesn't end up with a lot of the audience on stage, then we've done something wrong. There's generally people up there from the audience. Probably it's all because of these early memories.
I love when bands do that, when it feels real. Like I'm a big Metric fan, and they've done that tons of times over the years. They just bring there are like 50 people on stage at the end of the set, and Emily and the band really manage it really well, and it becomes like a party.
Yeah, I remember I saw this band at the Metro in Chicago. They were called the Royal Crescent Mob.
Oh, we're big RC Mob fans.
And they did that. I'd seen them a couple times, so I knew they would do that. And I got on stage with them at, probably the last song. My girlfriend at the time was up there, and her shoe fell off. And she's like, oh my God, I lost my, and I'm watching the shoe get kicked all over the stage. I'm trying to retrieve a shoe during this melee. It was kind of funny, but yeah, that band, they were awesome.
Oh, they were so great. We have this little punk rock club here in Louisville. Everybody played there. A lot of people, Red Hot Chili Peppers, you name it. But in this tiny 200-person room.
Everybody played there before they got big.
Yeah. And Royal Crescent Mob came all the time. My band played with them. We worshiped them. They were so good. Great live band. One of the best.
Well, let's see. We can get some cool concerts here, Jonathan. Rolling Stones at Racket in New York City. It's like a small venue.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of cheating because I worked with the Rolling Stones on the publishing side over the past few years when I was an executive with BMG who looked after their publishing. And I happened to be in New York when they were putting the last album out, Acme Diamonds. And I had a friend who said, are you in town for the Stones thing? And I was like, what Stones thing? And they said, well, they're doing this underplay tomorrow night. And I immediately sent a note to management. I was like, hey, I'm just finding out about this. Is there a possibility that maybe there's a spot for me to be privileged enough to join in? And man, oh man, that room is, what is it? A 600 cap room, I think. And we were a colleague and I got to bring a guest, and I brought one of my licensing team members with me. And we ended up pressed up against the balcony at the front of the balcony, which had about a 50-foot, probably less. It was about 40 feet, I think, between my nose and the front of the stage. And it was like essentially being in like a living room watching the Stones play. And it was an 8-song set. It was like a showcase length set, but they brought Lady Gaga out for the feature. that she did on the album, and it was mind-blowing. And just looking down on the crowd, it was like I was watching the crowd, and the whole room was like, oh, there's Daniel Craig and Rachel Weisz and Chris Rock, and oh, there's Jimmy Fallon. Oh, and Questlove sitting next to him, of course. And it was like a who's who of New York celebrity, and me somehow. So I felt very privileged to be in the room for that, and got to see the Stones a couple of times on that tour as well, which it's just remarkable how they've continued. I mean, you could make a strong case that they're better than they've ever been as a live band. It's rare to see a band that gets the scale of playing in a football stadium across with also somehow seeming accessible and real and human. And I think I've really only seen that a couple of times, I would say, at that size over the past like 20 years. And the other one was recently, I got to see Oasis with my friend Morgan Neville last year, filmmaker friend of ours, who invited me to see them at the Rose Bowl. And that just blew my mind. I'd worked also on the publishing side with Oasis's music years ago at Sony, and saw them a few times. And the kind of dark secret, you went to see them with me, didn't you? At the Bowl.
Yeah, we were great. Or the Bowl.
Yeah. And the thing with Oasis that nobody really admits is back in the day, they were okay live, but they were kind of a mess usually. And this show was so powerful and joyful. And again, band that's been coaxed back into being out there again, somehow pulls it together and is better than they've ever been. And I think that kind of stuff is inspiring to Ben and me and the rest of the band to see, you know, we're getting up there, and now we can continue to play music. It's a gift. And it's also like, I think we're better at it now. We write more efficiently and more freely, I think, and we're less constrained by thinking about like, oh, what's going to be popular or what's going to connect. It's more like, no, what do we want to do and what are we good at? So that's sort of where we went with this new record.
You know what? I'll do a sidebar. I'll never forget the night before Adele had broke. You took me to a showcase at Largo. And I mean, the new Largo, what is it? 150,
200 seats.
200 seats. She's belting. I mean, just stunning. And then Jonathan and I hung outside with her while she smoked a cigarette and drank a glass of wine and talked to her, you know, about her career and where she was going and stuff. And, you know, a couple months later, she's as big as Barbra Streisand or Lady Gaga or whatever. And I'll never forget that night as just being like, wow, to see somebody in that tiny room, like you saw the Stones before their huge stadium act, was pretty amazing.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the new album, but you guys opened up your songs as compared to Here's to the Losers. As far as the length of the songs, they're longer. There is a wide variety of sounds on the new album, which we'll chat about in a minute. Jonathan, you had another one about Nine Inch Nails, kind of the same performance.
Yeah, again, it's a little bit of cheating because these are artists that I had the privilege of working with as, you know, a licensing executive. And I was at Columbia Records at the time, and they had just signed with the label, and they were doing a series of shows in LA at small clubs. And I got to see them, I think, like 3 times that week. The best one being at the Troubadour, which is, again, under 600 capacity room. I think I was on the balcony once again, on the front of the balcony, and it felt like Ben said earlier about Van Halen, it felt like I was in a room with a bomb going off. You know, it was beautifully mixed. The sound was amazing, but it was just like, this band is too big to play this space. And like the structure of the building is going to just give way. But it was a privilege and also just really inspiring. And Josh Freese, well, no, that was after Josh left. It was Island Rubin, who now has left again, and Josh Freese is back. It's hard to track the back and forth of the Nine Inch Nails Foo Fighter drumming multiverse. But Island, I think, had just started playing with them. And I don't think I'd ever seen him play. I think he was pretty young at the time. And man, what a powerful player. And just the rest of the band was insanely inspiring.
It's funny thinking about all these things because live music has been such a big part of our lives. I mean, when you start talking about these concerts, it's triggering one after the other. I remember seeing the B-52s in Lexington, and they made them stop because they thought the balcony was going to come down from the dancing. Like their energy was so potent that it almost couldn't be pulled in. People were just going crazy. And it's like one after the other. If I start thinking about all of these, seeing Morphine at the Troubadour was sublime at the height of their fame. You know, like that was the coolest rock and roll thing I think I've ever seen. I remember another one too, real quick, and then we should get going. Tool were our friends. And before they had really gotten crazy huge, they asked if I would play congas with them at a very early version of Lollapalooza. Rage Against the Machine played that day, right before they had broke. And I'll never forget being backstage and watching 60,000 people go like,
Yeah, up and down. Yeah. I saw Nine Inch Nails, like you're saying, Ben, it triggers all these other shows at the first Lollapalooza. And that was just insane. I mean, they were definitely one of the highlights and just like pretty much destroyed their instruments. And it was total mayhem.
no,
It was unbelievable.
they bring it. Yeah.
So you've got more concerts listed here, but I thought maybe in the interest of time, we could maybe talk about your album and the band because there's stories there too. We've shifted to concert stories sort of, but you guys as a band, and Ben, you just mentioned Tool, and we'll get to that in just a second, but just real quick, background. I guess you guys formed in 1990 in Louisville, and 92 you moved out to LA and you began this residency at the Largo nightclub, which you've mentioned here. And yeah, the capacity I have written down is like 280 people. And I was just wondering, because that was kind of like a jump off point for you guys, right? As far as things happening at that club. Like, how did that residency come about? Like, you guys just show up in LA and say, hey,
We were in Louisville. We were drawing pretty substantial crowds, like as many people as they get back into these rooms. And we kind of knew we were onto something. And this friend of ours, Cindy Lamb, she was a music journalist. She was like, if you guys go out to LA, there's this club. I'm going to see if I can get you booked in there. They're going to love you. And we went out there for a one-off. And the guy, Mark, who owns it, who ultimately became our manager, was like, if you guys want to come out here, I'll give you a weekly gig. And so we kind of knew that. We're like, all right, is everybody ready to pack up and move to Beverly, and we did it. And that gig became like a thing where like our shtick was so unique at that point that it was attracting a lot of show business types, actors, musicians. I mean, you could see people as diverse as David Bowie to who were some of the people who showed up.
Eber Winger came to see us one time. We had Oscar-winning actors and film producers, and there was one night that I looked out in the audience, and it was a Friday night at Largo on Fairfax, and David Bowie was sitting in a booth halfway back at the back of the room. So,
wow.
Yeah, and people like Tool, people were coming because we were kind of doing this stand-up, but also playing our music. And we didn't look like anybody else at the time. We were kind of inspired by Devo and CZ Top and other people to present in matching costumes. But we had this sort of punk rock energy, this Don Rickles energy that we would just take into any room. And inspired by Van Halen and Metallica and all these other people, we're like, we are bringing it every night. We just loved performing and we had a blast. And I think it translated. And the thing we always talk about too is John Bryan was in residence there as well, who's gone on to be a big composer and collaborator. And he would get up there and play with us, and so we were like, okay, John's up here, we're here. And he ended up playing on our first two albums, quite a scene up there. So it was kind of our launch into the Los Angeles music community.
Yeah, because I was reading that whole scene or that music, it's dubbed the Cocktail Nation, where it's like 50s, 60s vibe.
There was a confluence of bands who were kind of mining the past a little bit at the same time we didn't know about. So we had kind of dug into our love of classic music of that era and presented in that way. Little did we know there were other bands kind of doing the same thing at the same time. And I wish that I wasn't so, punk rock at the time because we got lumped in with the Cocktail Nation.
well, there was also like a thing that was happening too, like with some reissues that were going on. The Capitol Records had been putting out a series called Ultra Lounge that was like revisiting all the stuff from their back catalog, like Ema Sumac and Louis Prima and all this kind of Vegas-y stuff, but also Exotica and Tiki and novelty records like Mrs. Miller. And there was just all this sort of throwback stuff. And it's like that thing where everything old is new again. I feel like we're seeing it right now with Zoomers, and young people are really into 90s stuff, which I think is hilarious because I'm like, it wasn't that great, kids. And I feel like, there was that period in the 70s and 80s when people were really into the 50s. Like Sha Na Na had their revival kind of moment, and Happy Days and all that stuff. And it was similar in the 90s. I think there was like a very specific little moment of like, let's look back at that, 60s space age kind of pre-Vietnam era. It is interesting because in some ways it's sort of the last period of cultural innocence in a way. And we kind of leaned in on it, I think, purposefully because we were coming from having been in like punk and hardcore world, a lot of us. And we were like, it just didn't feel authentic to what we wanted to do in terms of songwriting or creation. And it felt like the actual punk rock thing to do was kind of go against the grain and do that. And so there were other bands, like there was Combustible Edison out of Boston, who were people who'd been, Michael Cudahy and Liz and the rest of that band had all been in indie rock and punk bands in the Boston scene. And they started doing kind of like Martin Denny-esque tiki stuff. And then there was Big Bad Voodoo Daddy here in Los Angeles that was doing like jump swing. And we were more specifically like really into the Louis Prima thing. We were like, let's do the small Vegas lounge kind of vibe, wild times in a small room with a lot of drinks. And, we had like signature cocktails and matching suits. And so it was a little moment. And I think it coalesced with the movie Swingers, which kind of embodied that sort of subculture of, young people who were like, we're going to learn how to swing dance and we're going to drink a fancy martini and, wear vintage clothing. And it never really fully turned into anything that was commercially viable, which is fine. It was just a fun moment of sort of weirdly counterculture expression that was a counterculture of being square in a way. This is kind of funny.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the band that we played with a lot in Louisville who ended up being Sea and Cake and everything.
Oh, the Cocktails.
The Cocktails.
Yeah, and they have their DNA in like Tortoise and Sea and Cake, and they were a really cool bunch of guys who just toured around the Midwest. They kind of faded away into other bands after we had worked with them a few times playing live.
But they were part of that too.
Yeah, they were definitely part of that.
Whereas there was a lot of groups who were kind of mining that area. And we were resentful because we're like, well, we're more than that. We contain multitudes. We don't want to be labeled, but whatever. We probably should have cashed in on that.
Hi, this is Charles Zona, and we're glad you are enjoying this episode of Seeing Them Live. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please fill out the form on our website at seeingthemlive.com. Also, if you like the show, please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And now, back to the show. I love, your sound. I used to DJ at this bar, small bar in our neighborhood and stuff. And every once in a while, somebody would come up and say, oh, who was that you were playing? And the song on the new album, it's the first song, Looking for Diamonds. That's one of those songs. If I put that on at a party or whatever, somebody's going to come up and say, who's that? What song is that? And the whole vibe on Here's to the Losers. You'd mentioned Swingers, and you guys have a song on that soundtrack, Paid for Lovin', right? Yeah. I love putting that kind of music on and just kind of chilling out, sort of thing. And I was telling Ben before we got on recording here, you were on the Jimmy Fallon show, and it was throwing me for a loop. I was on your website, that's love-jones.com. And, you have those videos there. And he's holding up the Here's to the Losers album, which was released in, 93. But Jimmy Fallon wasn't on then. So I'm like, yeah, it's throwing me for a loop.
He wasn't even on SNL at that point.
Yeah, right.
He was like a young improv actor, and he used to come see us before he was famous.
Yeah. So he loved your music. He'd come see you guys. And then his wife, as the story goes, and you guys feel free to jump in and tell it, requested was it like 2019 or something? If you could record like singing happy birthday to him or something as a nice little message. And you guys decided to record an actual original song for his birthday.
Yeah, that was 2018. So yeah, we created a piece of original music for him and put in a bunch of references to things that were particular to him, like his friends, his dog's name, his deep hatred of mayonnaise.
His ring of Vulcan.
Yeah. So it was fun. And then I think they did a limited pressing vinyl for his birthday party and gave it out to friends. And, that's it. It was like a little closed offering. We have the recording. We don't have any plans to do anything with it, but it was very special. And then a few months later, they came back to us and asked us if we wanted to be on the show to celebrate the 25th anniversary of our first album, Here's to the Losers, which came out in
93. Yeah.
93. So we ended up on the show in January of 2019. So it was a little after the 25th anniversary.
And I didn't believe it. I was like, bullshit. They're not going to have us on the show. We have nothing to shill. We got nothing going on, And he was like, no, they're going to do it. And I was like, they can have Beyonce on there. Why are they going to have a 30-year-old band that nobody's ever heard of on there? I was as shocked as anybody when we got there, that they had recreated our first album jacket. I was blown away by the whole experience. It was so fun.
Yeah, the set they created, the woman on the cover is in a lounge at a bar.
Yeah.
And that was like in front of the stage. And then you guys play the first song, and then the second song, you invite him, since he's such a big fan, he sings along with you guys. And it was, that's really cool.
That's once in a lifetime stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Well, you know what was fun? We were sound checking, and two things are memorable to me. The guys who run the sound, who are incredible, were like, you're not using any backing tracks, right? Nothing. We're like, no, we just play live. And he's like, that's crazy. Everybody who shows up here uses backing tracks. Then we're playing. Jimmy comes in and he's like, play Ohio River, play that, play that, play that. And we started playing it. He jumps up there and starts singing. And he's like, we're going to do 2 songs. I was only going to do 1, but now we're going to do 2. And I'm going to sing with you. And I was like, great, even better. So that was stunning. He came to me backstage and he was like, you don't understand. You're like one of my favorite bands. And I'm like, no, you're. And he's like, name any song on any of your records. And I named one and he just starts singing it. And I was like, wow, you really are a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you could tell in the video, he's totally into it. Yeah, you're right. The bands usually just play 1 song, but then you guys play the second song with him, and it's really cool.
Yeah, so it's funny. Whenever I see him going off about a musician or talking excitedly to someone about their new film, I don't know if people get how real that is. He's like an enthusiast. He loves talking about the things he loves. And so it was really special getting to spend time with him and to do the show. And it's kind of carried us into this new period of creativity in a way.
Yeah. You have this new album out, The Greatest Show on Earth, and it was released in February, right? February of 26.
Yeah.
And there's 6 songs on it. Like I said, in general, they're longer in length than the tracks on Here's to the Losers. But Looking for Diamonds has just a really cool sound to it. Again, hard to describe. I struggle sometimes with like genres and labeling things, but that and Twilight on Sand Hill, that's another cool song, right? Like you could just like sit back and listen to that. And that's an instrumental, that last song.
Very cinematic.
Yeah, you hear elements of other bands like Steely Dan on, I believe, When We Are Free, and also some Chicago, sort of early Chicago, but, not quite like, it sounds a little different, but you can definitely feel it, So you guys started, I guess, writing these songs in 2019 or 2020 during COVID, is that correct?
Yeah, it was an interesting thing because I think that thing that's weird about being in a band like this is it never stopped. Like, it just kind of is always there in the background. We'll get together, we'll write music. There's no real plan for success or anything. We just keep doing it because we love it and it's fun. And during COVID, I had gotten a new guitar and an amp from Barry, and I just liked the way it sounds. That's where that instrumental came. So I brought that stuff to him. And then we were like, okay, let's just start making some music together. Barry has an old warehouse that's pretty charming. It's surrounded by old antiques and all kinds of.
Barry is our bass player, just to clarify. I don't think we've said that.
Yeah. And it was like, well, we can play here and we can practice here. We started inviting all our collaborators in. And during these long jam sessions, where you had to wear a mask, we'd have the doors all open and everybody's drinking, and it's in the South. And there was a lot of romance around it to me. There's a train that runs right by, crickets are chirping, people are wandering in. It would turn into a house party half the time where we'd like just be playing for people who wandered in.
Everybody eventually got COVID anyways.
Yeah, it didn't matter. And so we started to formulate these songs, but they became like these little mini symphonic. I always cite Gil Evans as an influence on this, as these sort of long compositions in the way that some jazz is. It's not like, oh, you play the head, then everybody solos for half an hour and you come back to the head. They're like little pieces that reflect each other. And they became these long compositions, but they're still rooted in pop and melody. And that's where the Steely Dan thing comes in, because like when we wrote these, the initial response was like, well, it's only 6 songs. And we're like, yeah, but so is Gaucho, like Gaucho, Asia. So we're like, well, that's fine. We're not under any sort of commercial restrictions. We just want to do what we want to do. And so that was also a challenge for Jonathan, because he lives in LA, and we're like, okay, well, let's try to sing over these really long songs. Let's try to see where they get. But that became a really fun challenge where 4 pieces into it, there's a new melody that sort of reflects the original one. And yeah, it was really, really fun. It reminds me of Brian Wilson a little bit too, and songs like Good Vibrations that go on and on and on and have different pieces. Supertramp did it, a lot of people. What Great Our Love is like 6 long or something.
Exactly. And you mentioned like these jam sessions you guys would have. You do capture that on a lot of these songs. The vocals kind of cut out on parts, and you let the band play, and then you come back.
Chicago's a good point of influence because, Chicago, Earth, Wind and Fire, James Brown, the idea of having a large scale unit to work from opens up everything sonically.
That's a good moment to also give a specific shout out to our amazing horn section, the Badass Brass, who we started working with around the time of the Fallon engagement to kind of make that a more special show. And they've become part and parcel of everything we do now. They are members of our creative team, and their horn arrangements and charts, and in some cases, their songwriting contributions in a couple of instances have been invaluable to getting this going again.
And we have these other collaborators too, like Bob Ramsey is a great keyboardist here, and he's played with Leon Russell and all these different people. He's kind of a legend around this town. He plays at ball games, the organ. And he comes in and just astounds us with his concepts. So a lot of the keyboard and Todd Hildreth, there's a lot of really, they always say to surround yourself with people more talented than you are. That's what happened on this record.
Yeah, the musicianship is really impressive to listen to, and where each song goes, and they do sound all different, yet there's a commonality to them. But yeah, so you guys, you got the album out. Are you thinking of going on the road at all?
Well, the problem is we really want to. We all are grown-ups. We all have full-time jobs, like 11 of us at the top number. So even coordinating that many people to do one show is tough. And we do. We play occasionally, but, we played in New York a little while ago. We played here. We play here. And the dream would be is that, doing this press and having the new record out is that we get the opportunity to come to Chicago. We get the opportunity to go to Atlanta, Nashville, Louisville, and get out there and play some more. We're actively scheming to see if we can get ourselves back out there. LA, of course, we want to play in LA too. So I think it's all underway. If there's a demand and we can get the resources together to do it, it would be incredible. We'd love that. That's where we live. I mean, that's our strong places on stage. We love it.
Yeah. And that's what you had mentioned, somebody in the band, maybe it was Ben or Jonathan, you guys mentioned the energy of your shows live. You said you would put your band up against any other band as far as matching that energy that you get ever live.
It goes back to the Van Halen conversation, because that energy, and I'm talking energetically a bomb going on, not even volume. It's like the collective energy of that many people bringing their full expression at once is what we really try to do. We really get out there and it's like, okay, I don't care how many people we're playing. We're like, let's bring it. And we always have a great time. We always have fun. And so I'm hoping, I'm praying that we get to get back out there.
Yeah, that would be very cool. I'd love to see you guys live. As we come up on time here, guys, anything you'd like to plug? I briefly mentioned the website.
Whiskey Thief.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Whiskey Thief. Yeah.
So we have a partnership with Whiskey Thief Distillery, which is a fine bourbon distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky, but they also have a tasting room in Louisville, and we've done some events with them. And they are our partner on releasing this record. It's the first release on Whiskey Thief Music. Walter Zausch is the principal at the company, and he is our biggest fan. He can go toe-to-toe with Jimmy Fallon for that claim. and I think he'd probably win. Sorry, Jimmy.
I think he'd win. Yeah, he's old and dear.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in it from the beginning with us, and he's just a lovely guy, and they do make some incredible bourbon. If you're ever in Louisville or want to look them up, they're whiskeythief.com, and that's where you can also navigate around on the website and order our new album, The Greatest Show on Earth, directly from them on vinyl. And we're working on a distribution plan to get the vinyl in more stores. I've also had a few people hit me up asking, why can't I get a CD? So we'll probably come up with a plan to get it on that format as well, since that is a resurgent format in terms of physical goods for people. And as you said earlier, you can go to love-jones.com, our website, and we can do orders of the album there as well. But it's also available on all the streaming platforms, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to music, as well as the rest of our repertoire, the first 3 albums too. So hopefully we'll have some more news on upcoming shows soon. We're working on it. And it's also the 30th anniversary of Swingers, as I think I mentioned, and there might be some stuff going on around that later this year. So stay tuned. A lot of exciting behind the scenes conversations going on.
Yeah, there was a text thread this morning. I was like, maybe we record some more music real quick and just out there, So I don't know. There's a lot of like energy building around the band right now.
We should also give a big shout to our producer, John Alasia,
Yes.
who did such an incredible job on pulling this all together with the record. As we alluded to earlier, when you have as many players in the mix as we do and different cities, it is like herding cats at times. And having a steady hand in John, who is an icon of not just Louisville music, but also he is the man behind the curtain on all the great Dave Matthews records and did a lot of work on early John Mayer stuff. And it's just an incredible producer and partner and friend.
Nice. Yeah, so everybody check out the new Love Jones album, The Greatest Show on Earth, and fire it up at a party or something, and people think you're super cool. They're like, wow, who are these guys, man? This sounds awesome.
That's right.
I was saying that the other day. I like this discussion of being a hidden treasure. I think it's great. I'm hoping that people are like, oh, wow, this has been here the whole time. I didn't know about it. It's cool.
Yeah. And like you were saying, my daughter, she's in high school, and it just seems like everything is popular, sort of. The genres, don't matter. She's listening to Harry Styles, but also Fontaine's DC. And then she was asking me about Bob Dylan, too, the other day. And I'm like, oh, wow. So check out Love Jones. It's a blast from the past. It's definitely something new, too. And if you have anything else to report down the road, we'd love to have you back. I think, Jonathan, you mentioned you go to a lot of shows out in L.A. So, yeah, if there's anything that you guys ever want to talk about or, a tour comes together, we'd be happy to have you back on. So I just want to thank you guys for coming on, Seeing Them Live.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was super fun.
Take care. That's a wrap for our show. I want to thank today's guests for sharing their concert stories with us. Make sure to check out our show notes at seeingthemlive.com for links to websites, photos, and other artifacts mentioned in the show. I also want to thank my producer, Doug Florzak. The theme music for the show was composed by Doug and is featured on his album, Flagstone. If you have a concert story you'd like to share on our podcast, please visit our website and click on Become a Guest in the main menu. Then fill out the form and click the Submit button. If you seem like a good fit for the show, we'll contact you via email. I guess it's time to head for the exits. We'll see you next time on Seeing Them Live.